Okay, so Will, do you remember us first meeting?
God, no.
Do you want me to remind you?
Maybe.
So we were at some sort of a film something or other. There was some sort of event.
Oh,
And
that was with Trout Waters or something. I remember.
that's right, yeah. And you were standing against the back wall doing the usual chill Will bit. Will's very tall, by the way, so he doesn't hear easily. And we were talking, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm starting to learn, how to tie classic flies." And you said, "Oh, I tie classics." And I was like, "Oh, really? Who's this guy? Does he actually?" And I don't know if it was that night or the next day that you gave me. You're like, "Oh, here's a fly for you," and it was the most spectacularly fly tied Lady Caroline. I think it was a Lady Caroline. I've got a few of your flies that I've had for years now, still on display in my place in Canada. And I remember thinking to myself, this guy is the best tire I've ever seen in my entire life. And I still stand by that. And I know you're going to say, no, 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 but he really is next level, the level of intricacy, attention to detail, knowledge. It's just really astounding. Will is not a limelight kind of guy. You won't find him, touting himself all over the internet. He doesn't even have a website. He kind of relies on social media, which he's also not that vocal on. So I'm just so honored, Will, all these years later to have you sitting here with us. Thank you.
Thanks.
So tonight we're going to do a Q&A. I've got a ton of questions, and some of you have taken. Can you just let me know? I'm looking at all of you here. I'll change my grid view to the grid. Can you let me know with a show of hands if you've taken Will's class his class or gone to the tying phase and seen those videos there? They're the same ones. Tim, yeah. Awesome. Rick, yeah. Frank, Dan, awesome. Sharon, perfect. Donald, awesome. Great. Okay, let me get back out of here. So then hopefully you have got questions for me as well. Before we dive right in, does anyone have a question off the bat they want to kick off with? Or do you want me to start with hooks? Because we were just talking hooks right before we went live. Yeah, hooks. All right. Would you mind? And again, this is behind the paywall. It's not live in public on YouTube. It's not streaming on Facebook right now. So feel free to just let it all out, Will. We were talking about hooks. What's the dilemma with hooks right now when it comes to more traditional or classic flies?
The biggest dilemma right now, I guess, is there's a very limited supply of quality hooks these days. Most of us are seeking out older stuff. Partridges completely changed their lineup. The M's have changed, the N's have changed. They no longer make the CS10 ones or CS10 3s, which are the blind eyes. And quality has gone downhill. The partridge hooks are still good. The Gamakatsu hooks are still good, but they've gone away from the shapes that we've been using for, I guess you could say, close to 100 years now. So it's getting quite difficult to find something I would actually tie and fish on these days. The Alec Jackson heavy wires, they're still quite a good hook. However, the Alec Jackson normal ones, the 2051s or 2052s, just my opinion, but I think they're absolute crap. They break continuously. And I don't know, I might get in trouble for this from somebody somewhere, but I'll just show you guys a quick demonstration. So this is the Alec Jackson Spey fly hook. This is a 2052. This is a 1.5. I don't know if you guys can see this, but if you just put a pair of pliers just on the hook point there and you just very gently grab it, they just break off and there's nothing left of them. Now that can happen in the fish mouth, or that can happen on a rock, or just about anything. And sometimes even when you go to crush the barb, they just ping off. It's like it's not even there. And so I only, like when I'm tying flies for people, I only tie on those on request, because I have zero faith in them. And it doesn't matter if you're using the blind eye Alec Jacksons or if you're using the regular ones, they all do the same thing. I've had guys say to me, well, it's just a bad batch. And I've been buying them or getting them for close to 20 years now, and they've never changed. They've always done that. So you always want to try and seek out the blue herons, which there's a finite amount of because Davis stopped making them. And he is contemplating doing it again, but who knows if he is. And also the other quality hook out there, and it's my personal favorite, is the old Partridge CS-10-1. They're not very sharp, but you can sharpen them yourself, but they're really rock hard steel. They flex well, and I don't think I've ever had one break. They're excellent, excellent hook.
Have you ever looked into making your own?
Pardon me?
Have you ever looked into making your own?
No, I haven't. That's a very time-consuming endeavor. There's plenty of guys out there that do make their own hooks now, but you know, if you're ordering a hook from Byron Burke or from some of the other wonderful makers out there, you know, it's, you know, they're making these things by hand, and even though they are fishable, and they're rock hard steel, I know I've fished a few of Byron's hooks over the years, and if you're just fishing for yourself, and say you're just grease lining on a dry line and you're not worried about losing the hook or anything like that, then you know you're going to be fishing it over and over. You know, investing $25 into one hook, I guess, isn't so bad. And there's plenty of other guys out there that I can't name off the top of my head here that make wonderful, wonderful hooks, and they're tough as nails, but you know, it's just a cost factor, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Anyone else on hooks before we move into some of the other?
I just have a question on barbless hooks. I read an article recently that they're actually designed differently because a barbless hook doesn't have a barb, which is what's supposed to hold the fish. So it's actually engineered differently. But I can't really find any saltwater barbless hooks. There seem to be smaller ones for freshwater. I just don't know if you have any experience with that.
I do know, I have a few friends that have been involved in ordering custom hooks and stuff like that. And when these things come off the machines, they do roll off built to have the barb cut into them. So I think it's incredibly difficult for large manufacturers to actually switch up the manufacturing process in order to create a hook without a barb. So I think a lot of the times, really the only companies I've noticed that have put forth that effort are Partridge and TMC. And I think they've had to completely redesign their machines to actually do it. And I don't think there's quite the demand for both saltwater hooks and or salmon hooks for them to go to the extent to actually build the machinery to make the barbless hooks. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's the gist of it that I've gotten from friends that have worked with hook companies and stuff like that. And that's, from what I understand, that's the reason you don't see them.
Okay, I was interested to learn that they actually shape them differently though, because since there's no barb, it makes sense that they should be shaped a little bit differently to hold the fish without a barb. But someone I know just said the manufacturers have been kind of slow to make that change. And maybe that's because what you're saying, because of the machine, maybe it's too expensive. It just doesn't make economical sense for them.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. As far as the shape goes, yeah, I can see that, because I'm assuming that when the machine goes to cut the barb, it pushes up slightly just behind the point in order to take the steel when it's a little softer to cut the barb into it. So I don't know about holding the fish. That's information that I've never actually looked into. But
Can you
April, it's your friend Dr. Andy Danielchuk. He's the one that's clued me into this, and they do actually shape hooks differently to hold the fish. And he said he's just had a hard time getting manufacturers to get on this bandwagon, but he's really pushing to have it happen more.
right?
Because it's supposed to hook the fish easier because it doesn't have the barb, so it goes in easier. And then if it has a different shape, it holds the fish better. So it's supposed to be better than pinching the barb. It's like a completely different design, but only freshwater, not saltwater yet.
Right. All right. I'll ask him when I see him. I seem to run into him occasionally. What about hook eyes? Can we speak a little bit about, one, the history on the upturned eye? I don't know if you know anything about that. And B, or two, what your thoughts are on upturned, down versus straight, or downturned versus straight eye?
I actually don't know much about the history of the upturned eye. I believe that they originally did that just because it was easier.
Okay.
But
I always thought, I always had heard that it was a nod to the, you know, the upturned, snotty classic guys. I'm serious, totally serious. I had heard that from a historian.
I don't know. Maybe it was. I actually I don't know for certain, but I'm assuming with the return eye like that, it was probably far easier to just make the hook longer, bend it around, and squeeze it off.
Oh, okay.
I don't, like I say, I don't know for sure. I've never actually looked into that. It is also quite beneficial to have that long return eye there, especially when you're hitching a fly to fish, right? Because then you're not worried about your leader falling in behind the like behind the eye that's simply turned in, like you see on a lot of saltwater hooks or freshwater hooks. And then also, if you're hitching these a lot, you can bring it back. You can leave the head back quite. Well, you probably can't see that. You can bring the head back quite far, and you can leave yourself a bare area on the hook there in order to hitch it.
From a fishing stance, do you have preference? Because I've got flies from you that have been tied on a full hook, and I've got flies from you that have been tied with gut, I assume, or something similar.
Yeah, when I'm usually when I'm fishing gut, it's kind of hard to hitch those because usually you have to hitch them behind the head in order to have it stay there. So usually when I'm hitching them, I'll just do it on a return eye like that. And if I'm just fishing a loop, which you are most of the time anyway, I just use the gut-eyed flies because for the most part, you're only hitching these in certain types of water because you can only actually grease line properly in the truest sense on certain types of water. You can't just do it on any type of water. I mean, you can try and fish your fly sideways on virtually any water you want, but it doesn't always work. You really have to have a long downstream belly, and there's a lot more to it than that. But I don't know. It's just so much easier to do it on a return eye.
Got it. Do you have any other materials that you use besides gut? Is there a decent substitute?
Well, the best substitute really, and I've only been doing it for the last few years now. My buddy Adrian Cortez kind of put me onto it, is twisting your own gut out of 8-pound Maxima mono. And it's really simple. It looks almost the same. And it's quite strong. You can use 6 or 8 pound depending on the hook size that you're using. But it only takes a couple of seconds to do. It mimics the original gut quite well. You can also use Dacron, which I used to use quite a bit. But the thing about Dacron is you're able to keep the body quite slim on your fly. But the mono, I think, looks way better. And also it's considerably stronger.
Mm-hmm. When you do use Dacron, do you hit it with a dab of super glue, or do you just leave it floppy?
No, you're better off to leave it floppy.
Any questions on hooks or any sort of gut before we dive into actual materials? Just there's no you don't have to ask permission, just speak up at any point if you'd like to, and you can always come back to. So we'll move on. I'm going to go into silks and some of those other materials, if that's okay with everyone. Silk versus some of the more synthetic stuff, or some of the other alternative options, or the other options. What do you think, Will? Which are you?
Well, I only use silk. That's I don't know. I don't even own any rayon or any of that. All I've used is silk. I really like the lag art and stuff because it's it's basically three strands that's twisted. And so when you're doing tips or tags, it's quite easy to untwist and just use one solitary strand. Usually for bodies, depending on the size of the fly, 2-aught or smaller, I'll generally just use the lag art and stuff because I can get one small tiny piece off of it and keep it slim. Anything bigger than that, the JEC Japanese embroidery silk works great. the old Pure Sols silk obviously is the holy grail of silks, if you can find any of it. It's beautiful. It keeps a nice shine to it, and it seems to be tougher than the rest of the stuff, but it's almost non-existent now because they haven't made it in decades.
That was that comes on the cardboard tube, like so, and you used to get a little box, and it looked like a little.
That's the Japanese embroidery silk.
That's yeah. It's which
Yeah,
one are you?
The Pure Sols. I can grab it. I can grab a spool of it.
I'd love to see it. Is that okay with everyone? Sorry, I'm selfishly driving this meeting because I've got so many questions for him. Like 20 years worth of questions that I've wanted to ask Will. And again, speak up at any time if anyone has, thanks, Alan, has any questions.
So this is the Pure Sols. Generally, when you find it, there's a bunch of different kinds. The one that you want for the bodies on flies and stuff is called tag. They just call it tag. And then like this is the stuff that John McLean sells at Feathers NC. This is just the Japanese embroidery silk, and this is the stuff that you see most of the time. It's yeah, it's marketed by Alec Jackson. Lots of fly shops have it. It's all quality stuff. It's all basically the same. The only time you're really using the Persol stuff is basically out of nostalgia. It's I don't know. I think it's the toughest and nicest looking. However, it's kind of a pain to work with.
Do you need to have gloves for all of those?
Yeah, you can use gloves. I almost always use gloves. There is a product out there. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me. And you can put it on your fingers. John McLean sells it at Feathers NC again. But like I say, I can't remember the name of the stuff. And it's just like it's just almost like a chapstick kind of material that you put on your fingers. It's I can't remember what it's marketed for, but that's out there and available if you're you know, if you're not working outside like I am all the time and your hands are completely destroyed. So
what about thread, Will? What are you using for thread these days? Are you round or flat? Team round or team flat?
No, I use the Lagarton extra strong 50 GSP. It's flat. That's the only thread I use. Sometimes I will go to the 50 GSP from UTC. A lot of people hate the gel spun thread because it's very, very, very slippery. But most of the flies I tie are for fishing and customers and stuff like that. So I like the GSP thread because it's incredibly strong. I can really reef on materials, and that way they don't move so much. A lot of people use wax and stuff. I never ever use wax until I get up to the head, and then I'll use it sometimes. I'll use Bill Overton's wax, or my friend Adrian makes a really nice wax. But as far as thread goes, I always use 50 GSP until I get up to the head, and then I just use the Lagarton 70 black, which isn't GSP, but it makes a really nice finish head on the fly, and if you have to put wax on it, it works quite well. It's also flat.
Have you always used GSP?
Yep.
Okay. And what about when you're mounting your wings? You don't find any slippage there?
Nope. When I'm mounting wings like on a full dress salmon fly, I always fold them in my fingers while I'm pushing down on the thread. And there's always a fine line with GSP with pulling too hard because then you will cut through your feathers. But that just comes with experience. If you learn the tension properly, you can pull on it quite hard, and you won't cut through, and it'll anchor them in place very, very well. And the other nice thing about the GSP thread, as anybody that saltwater fishes know, GSP loves to cut into itself. So when you're pulling down on things on a fly with the GSP thread, if you're pulling properly on it, it will push into itself underneath, and it'll anchor itself quite well. And then you don't have to worry about any movement for the materials.
Anyone else on any of those things? Let's go feathers.
So when you're using wax at the head, what kind of you Overton, the old green tube, that texture? Okay.
That's my favorite wax. I'm still using the one tube that my stepdad left me when he passed away. I'm assuming that tube's about 40 years old. One tube
Yeah.
lasts the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's how old mine is. So yeah, I got it.
Yeah, that stuff there is.
Who wants to go into feathers first? You don't want me to, because I will hijack this entire meeting. Someone else take this question.
Feathers,
Yep.
Cory Bustard.
Good start. I like your style, Don.
Like you, I'm in BC, so trying to find decent Cory Bustard. Any hints?
See, that's the thing about a lot of these classic tying materials is a lot of the times, you meet people over the years and you source stuff out. Ryan Heights at Michael and Young oftentimes has a lot of Cory Bustard, but you have to ask.
Yep.
He will shut the store. He did this with me again almost 20 years ago. He heard I was tying classics. He waited until everyone was out. He locked the door and brought out 2 big boxes from the back. And it was like Disneyland. I'll never forget it. So yes, that's Ryan Heights. You think he still has those boxes?
The boxes are actually mostly gone now. Classic tying has become so popular in the last 10 years that it's almost picked through. I was just in there on Saturday looking through it, and there's really not much left. You may have kind of missed out, but about, I want to say 3 months ago or so, someone came into the shop with a bunch of Cory Bustard and sold it all to Ryan. I bought 2 of the bigger ones from him, and I'm not sure if he still has any of the rest of it left. But if you put in a good word with Ryan and you just tell him you're looking for it, a lot of the times he will find it within the year. And then John McLean always has it. It's best just to reach out to him. He likes to get a donation to the Cory Bustard Foundation down there, and then he will send it to you. Or
Yeah.
if you spend a few $100 or $1,000, he'll maybe be gracious enough to send you a couple paddles.
Yeah, and that can go across the border because it's from a zoo.
If it comes from John, it comes with paperwork.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so they're basically the stuff that he gets. It's all from a registered what do you call it?
Aviary.
Yeah, but it's what they do is they rescue birds, and it's a breeding program and it's a research facility.
Oh, cool.
So any of the funds that John receives for the Cory Bustard, it all goes to basically research, development, helping the birds, feeding the birds, and stuff like that. So it's all a charitable donation, and it comes with paperwork and a CITES permit, I believe. So
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other exotics while we're there? Anyone else have questions about those?
Yeah, if I can't find like I guess the golden pheasant red pieces.
Oh, the crest?
Yeah, I found the rump. I guess Ryan said try this rump or whatever for a little bit. I don't know if is that ever used? I don't know if you had some focus for you or not. I can't tell. But yeah, I couldn't quite.
Are you showing it, Chris? Oh, hang on, Chris. Let me spotlight you. And good to see you, by the way.
Hey, likewise.
Likewise. What are you pulling up?
Oh, it was this kind of
Yeah, the ring neck.
that's a ring neck.
yeah, and then these are these the ones you're using in the tail?
Oh, for the tail.
No, for the Lady Caroline.
Yeah.
So Lady Caroline, you want the red breast feathers off the golden pheasant.
Right, breast feather. Okay.
You want to show that, Will? Do you want to grab some?
I'll grab it. Just a second.
I'll let you back.
It's really hard to find, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you could buy a full cape. I wonder, they used to sell them, you could buy a little package of like 12 crests.
Oh, you can buy them in, oh, okay.
They weren't
Yeah.
that, I mean, again, a long time ago, and they weren't great. I used to have to shape all mine around cups.
So if you're talking about the ones for the Lady Caroline, those are the red breast feathers. So those are these here.
Okay.
They'll generally be on the underside of the wing. Funny story about golden pheasants. No one has been able to get a skin or anything for about the past 5 years. They've completely, I don't know why, but shut the door on sending the golden pheasant skins anywhere. I've been trying to find a couple for almost a year now. I can't find one anywhere.
Wow.
The only place you find golden pheasant skins now is at estate sales or something like that. I don't know if that's going to change, but you know, it's one of the most used birds in classic fly tying. You can still find the crests or the tippets anywhere. Everybody still has those, but for some reason, you can't get the bodies anymore, and it's I don't know what's going on. It's bizarre.
I have a really
Okay.
stupid question. And first, before my stupid question, the red then, that's the tippets, right?
The red is the breast feathers.
The breast feathers.
The tippets are these, and that's just below the crest.
Yeah.
So the tippets, which are the black barred orange, these are called for on like probably 60% of any married wing classic Atlantic salmon fly. They're readily available. You can find those anywhere. I don't know what the difference is between that and selling the whole cape, but yeah, it's getting frustrating for everybody.
So what would you use
Okay.
as a substitute for the breast feathers then? Is ring neck okay, like what Chris is using?
Oh yeah, ring neck. The rump feathers, like you just showed in the picture on the video there, those dyed red work just fine. I actually, whenever you're tying a general practitioner, I actually prefer the dyed ring neck rump feathers over using a golden pheasant. I just think they're longer and they have a better shape and they cut to the top of the hook a lot better.
My stupid question, Stu, and you'll probably know this, is what are all the pheasants that we go hunting for then in America? What are those pheasants called? Where they release them all? Those aren't golden pheasants?
Those
These
are
are the ring necks, yeah.
Ring
neck.
Oh, they're ring neck. Okay. Thank you.
I think the
Okay.
golden pheasant came from China, right?
yeah, the goldens usually come from China. Yeah.
Okay. What's next for feathers? Who else has a feather question?
Swan, goose, or turkey?
I warned Will of this. We were ready for this one. I'm gonna just
Goose is the best. That's just my opinion. I like goose because it's quite soft. It collapses really easily. It's readily available. The only problem with goose is trying to find long stuff. But swan is quite nice. You rarely find it above about a 6/0. Sometimes you do, but the problem with swan is the tips don't marry that well. Actually, I have some right here. This is from the old Kelson collection that they sold quite a few years ago. But the problem with swan, I don't know if you can see this, but like the edges, these ones are squished, but the edges aren't always that nice. Whereas if you've got goose, most of the time, you know, you can get a really nice edge on the goose.
Yeah,
it tends to be a little bit nicer. Obviously, when you're going to bigger flies and stuff like that, you're going to want to go with the turkey. It's quite difficult to use, especially when you're using turkey tail feathers. Unless you have a large surface area to tie it onto because of the width of the actual barbules on the turkey. When you're collapsing it down, if you don't have a really wide base on the hook to collapse it into, it'll end up rolling off the side of the hook, and it'll cause your wing to split. So anything usually 3/0 or smaller, I tend to use a Goose for that. Sometimes for nostalgia purposes, I use Swan, but it's mainly Goose. I like the look of it a lot better. Turkey you can use on virtually every side if you get the secondaries, but you rarely see the secondaries for sale. I don't know why. The secondaries on the turkey tail are great. They're a lot more malleable. They imitate Goose a lot better. And when you're doing the underwing on a lot of patterns like the Jock Scott and stuff like that, most of the time I try and use secondaries if I can find them, just because it's not, like I say, it's not as thick. So when you go to collapse it underneath the married wing, so you either do it behind the hackle, which is a kind of a modern thing. They never used to do that back in the old days, but the difficulty in doing with that is you don't create that nice little A-frame in order for you to put your married wing over top. So if you do your throat and then you put your underwing on your white tip turkey, and use that as you should properly, and the way they used to tie, you use that and you'll create a little bit more of a nice tented area to drop your married wing on. The secondaries, they work a lot better because once again, you don't have that width, so it doesn't take up all that room. It kind of keeps it constricted right to the middle, so it's right above the shank of the hook, and then you have a little bit better of a base to actually put your married wing over top.
Yeah, okay. So Goose and marrying to golden pheasant or Lady Amherst, I have a hard time holding it together.
A lot of the time when you're looking at a recipe for a married wing, 90% of the time it's going to ask you for Cory. The wonderful little trick with Cory Bustard and or Florican Bustard is they love to marry to anything. So say you're tying a black dog, or you're tying what's something else simple, thunder and lightning. When you're marrying your golden pheasant into the wing, if you put one little strip or two little strips of Cory up against the golden pheasant, it'll marry like a zipper. Same thing with the Amherst. Cory Bustard just marries to it like it's not even I don't know how to. It's very, very easy.
Oh,
that's the best way to go about it. It's very difficult to actually get most other feathers to marry to golden pheasant tail or Amherst. You can do it, but it's a little bit of a struggle sometimes. So if you just use a little piece of Cory, whether it's Florican or Cory, it makes your life a hell of a lot easier.
Cool. Thanks.
Drew has a question for you. He's having a microphone issue. Is there a way to tell that you are getting a good feather at things like estate sales or garage sales? Are there certain tests or lifespans? Actually, that's one of the questions I had too. That can help with choosing.
Well, if you keep like lifespan, like how long the feather will last.
Yeah.
Well, the feather will last forever if you keep it with mothballs and you keep it in a plastic bag and you keep it out of the sunlight. It'll like. I've got I've got Katinga Kiana mounts, like the little chatterer feathers that, they're probably 200 years old. There's nothing wrong with them. If you protect the feathers, you keep them in plastic, keep them out of the light, and keep a mothball in there, they'll virtually last forever. One of the things that you want to look out for when you're buying stuff for married wings is stress marks in the feather. So if you buy a turkey feather, like a white turkey, you'll see it is a stressful part in the bird's life. It wasn't getting enough nutrients or whatever. You'll see these little lines that come down kind of backwards throughout the feather. So when you dye them, or you're working with them and you're using quite a broad strip, they'll become quite prevalent. So you want to try and make sure they don't have too many stress marks. If you're doing tiny married bits, like if you're only going like 2 barbules and then a Cory Bustard and then 2 barbules and a Cory Bustard, those stress marks don't show up basically at all. But if you're using quite broad strips, like if you're tying a D pattern or something like that, those stress marks show up. So when you're grading a feather, that obviously would be like a B grade or something like that. But they're still perfectly usable. You just got to know when to use them. The other thing you want to look for is the ends. You want to make sure that the ends aren't too fine, because if the ends are too fine, then they don't want to marry to other things, which is great if you're doing stacked wings or if you're doing a Rogan pattern or mixed wings or something like that. It doesn't really matter. But if you're going for that perfect like microdendage style wing, then you want to make sure that your ends are fairly thick at the end there so that they marry properly. I don't quite know how to describe it because it's not actually thick. It's just it's almost like it ends more abruptly than other feathers. It almost looks like somebody cut it with a scissor, but they didn't. And that being said, you can get away with trimming your ends with scissors on certain feathers, mainly Goose because it's so fine. But if you're doing it on larger flies and stuff like that, obviously it's quite noticeable. But yeah, sorry, I kind of got off track there. One of the things you want to look for when you're at estate sales and stuff like that, you want to look down, say down here where all the fuzzy bits are on the feather, and you want to make sure that there's no little, almost like sections missing. It'll look kind of thin, like it's almost opaque, and there's fuzzy bits after that, and that generally means that an insect's been munching on it. So if an insect has been munching on it, there's a good chance that there could be eggs in there, and that could thoroughly destroy all your fly tying materials down the road if you don't keep them in mothballs. So you always want to make sure down the ends here, you want to pick through that really well and make sure there's no insect eggs or chew marks or anything like that. Because if you bring something home, say a bag of feathers, and you got some insects in there and you throw it in with the rest of your stuff, that mothballs or it's not in cedar, and then you don't look at it for a month or something like that, and you come back and everything's been chewed through. So that's one thing that you have to be super careful with. And obviously there's some people get pretty worried about disease and stuff like that, but for the most part, any feathers that we're working with have been thoroughly washed and processed, and if they've been in somebody's collection for 50 years or something like that, I don't personally worry about it too much. But you can always wash your feathers in a little bit of dish soap and then rinse them really, really, really well. And then after you rinse them, if you soak them in a little bowl of cold water with a tiny drop of woolite, it'll actually puff them out and get all the little barblets on the barbules to puff out again. And then they're quite usable again.
Whoa, thank you. What about, I know when I used to bring home roadkill, I'd throw it in the freezer for some time. Does that work, or was I just preserving eggs?
I'm assuming that works. I tend to go the washing route, and also borax works great, obviously, because it dries everything out. Yeah, I do keep, like, I got a couple of heron skins in the freezer. I just haven't got around to processing them, but yeah, that's a good way to keep them safe for the time being.
So if you do go to a garage sale and you find a full skin, and the leather itself is cracking and starting to peel, it doesn't matter because the feathers still should be okay.
Yeah, usually the feathers are just fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a matter.
If you read The Feather Thief, that book, those feathers were from like the 1800s, so it's right. So they got to be good.
Yeah, they last a long time if you look after them.
Can you comment on Marabou a little bit? I'm kind of obsessed with doing a bunch of saltwater flies with Marabou, and I find give me some instruction on how I can get like really good big pieces, or is there I don't know much about Marabou, but I love the material. I'm trying to learn more about how to get better source, better materials.
With Marabou, generally what you want to look for is you want to look for the feathers that are really, really, really long. Obviously Marabou, it's a pretty versatile material and it comes in all different shapes and sizes because it comes from all over the bird. But the company that I always buy from, I believe it's called the Fly Fisher's Choice. Can't remember the name off the top of my head. I could go try and find some here, but I haven't used Marabou in so long. I would have to dig for it, but I've got every color under the rainbow, and it's they have it at Michael and Young in Surrey, and it's the premium Marabou. And
Pro's choice. This is the logo.
yeah, that's it, April. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
And
it's, yeah, Fish Hunter, the Pro. Oh,
yeah,
maybe
Fish Hunter. There you go. Yeah, and they have the best Marabou out there, in my opinion. You pay a lot more for it. I think it's like $8 or $9 compared to like $2 or $3 for the rest of it. But that's
April, what is that again? Can you show me that one more time?
Sure.
What's it called?
So
that's it.
let me know when you've got it there. I think that's you, Bob. Let me know when you've got
Can
it.
you just read it?
Oh,
I
sure.
can't.
Yeah, so it's called Fish Hunter is the red writing up top. I don't know if that's the shop or the brand. I'm assuming it's the brand.
That's the brand. Yeah.
And then
Okay.
the Pro's choice in fly tying materials. And then this in particular is barred Marabou. But I also
Awesome.
Marabou back in Canada is this brand as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, that's the best stuff by far.
Marabou. And do you know the difference, Bob, between the blood quill Marabou and woolly bugger Marabou and all that stuff?
Well, I've been told that I want blood quill for the bigger stuff, like for saltwater flies, but I don't know why. That's just what I've been told.
Do you want to explain? Do you want to take that? Do you want to explain blood quill? Will?
Well, from what I understand, like I'm not a big Marabou guy. I hardly ever use it, but from what I understand, it's the longer stuff and it's quite easy to wrap. It's got the skinnier stems on it. I mean, I could be wrong. April, help me out.
No, that's right. It's not fluffy like the woolly bugger stuff. It's slender. You can use it as a substitute. Don't just put your earmuffs on for a second, Will. Bob, you can use it as a substitute for Heron. You can use it as a substitute for a lot of the more traditional skinny materials. I even used to use, sometimes I take like a Sharpie when I was really struggling for funds, and I would just use a Sharpie and I'd flatten them out. That way can make them look really Heron-like. So, and obviously you can bar them yourself. You don't need to pay extra to bar your Marabou, but yeah, the blood quill is just a much easier material to work with. And it's got that beautiful skinny look. Not great for tails, but it's great for hackle and whatnot.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Who else has a feather question?
Yeah. What is Cory Buster? I thought it was a brand, and then all of a sudden you started kind of using it like it's a type of feather.
I'll grab one.
And
I would also like to say that it has been a solid 15 years since I've tied a plastic. So while I'm here to help, I have very limited knowledge compared to Will. I'm just gonna drew the Fish Hunter made by Nature's Spirit. Oh, and anyone know this? Drew is asking, it's the Fish Hunter made by Nature's Spirit. Was it premium? It doesn't say Nature's Spirit. Anyone know that?
I think the company is Fish Hunter. I can't remember for sure and certain because
I think Nature's Spirit is different.
Thank you.
So that's Cory. And these are what we affectionately call paddles. These are for your largest flies, like 7, 8s, 9s, and 10-aughts. As you can see, that's probably about 5 inches right there. Or probably about 4 inches, I would say. But that's about that's about as big as you get. And then obviously it comes in all different sizes. I'm always careful to size the feather to the hook, so I'm not wasting big stuff. Like this here is about a 2/0. The one I just showed you is probably an 8 or a 9/0, but it's called for in 90% of the Atlantic salmon fly pattern wings you'll ever see in recipes.
Thank you. So Ryan's been selling me the cheap stuff because the turkey, they don't look like those paddles at all. They're
Sorry, I
really,
didn't.
I said Ryan's been selling me the cheap stuff.
Oh,
The paddles are so asymmetric, and you know, I only get so much use out of one of them. So yeah.
well, the beautiful thing about Cory is you really only need one strip of it. So even if the end is broken or anything like that, it really doesn't make any difference. Like with the golden pheasant there, if you just put one tiny little strip of Cory in between that and goose or turkey, that's all you need.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Ryan is Mr. Practicality. I think Ryan will just get the job done.
I'm gonna catch him late after the Christmas party when he's liquored up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great idea.
Can we talk dubbing real quick? You know, is it boar? I never used boar, but was it boar?
Pig's wool.
Pig's wool. Okay, so there's pig's wool, seal, synthetics. Well, where are you at these days?
I try and either use seal or pig's wool. There is nothing greater on this planet than pig's wool. And I don't know if it was just, it was the original dubbing material for classic Atlantic salmon flies, and it's just a joy to work with. It has that glow like seal does, and it's kind of tacky, almost like Velcro. It's the best stuff ever. It's just phenomenal. If you can ever source yourself out some, it's worth the money. It's just amazing stuff.
Hey, noted.
Seal's the second best, but pig's wool's by far the best.
What's the biggest difference between the naturals and the synthetics nowadays? Because they've come so far.
I don't know. I use synthetics like for general practitioners and stuff. You get that you get the shine and everything, but I don't know, for some reason, and even when it's in the water or something like that, nothing glows like seal fur or that pig's wool. Like they just, once you pick it out and it's underneath a hackle and underneath a rib, but it's just, I don't know, it's got that weird halo effect. It just, nothing looks like it. And no matter how shiny you get with your synthetics and stuff like that, it just, I don't know, it's just not the same. And also synthetics don't, it's almost like they don't react the same in the water. Whether they soak up too much water or they don't soak up enough, or I don't know. It's not quite the same.
Okay. Tina, do you want to ask your question? I think it's a good question.
My question was about thread and whether or not it has a lifespan, and if you should do anything to protect it when you're not using it, like from lights or whatever else.
Gel spun will not have a lifespan. That stuff should last indefinitely. As far as nylon thread goes, I don't know, I'd probably keep it out of the light just to keep it from getting faded. But the GSP, I wouldn't worry about that at all. And some of the thicker threads, I'm not sure I'd worry about them either. But I'm assuming that some of the nylon and stuff like that would tire over time if left in the sunlight.
Thank you. Jungle Cock, do you glue your cheeks ever? Or do you just not use those ones?
Glue?
Yeah. Split
Like
one.
glue the split?
Yeah.
Oh no, I usually for fishing flies I just use the B grade stuff, but for any of the flies that get framed or whatever, I just try and source out the super grade capes. There's so much jungle cock available on the market now. Like you can, every fly shop in the country has dozens of them now. And
What are they charging these days for a
what's that?
bee? What are they charging for a bee these days?
Oh, for a bee you can get like $65.
Oh, wow, wait, they've gone down then.
Oh
What-
yes,
Oh,
a super grade now costs you $160. They're half of what they used to be. They're
Oh.
everywhere.
awesome.
Yeah, it's very easy to find now. Like I was in Michael Young the other day, and I think there's 20 of them hanging on the wall.
Oh, Drew's found his package. It says, package says nature spirit fish under Marabou. I don't know. And I don't think you can put pictures on. All right, here, Drew, where are you? Here you go. I'm coming over. Hang on. There you go. Want to oh, I don't know. Are you at work or driving? Can you hold it up? Oh, can you hold it up? Let me spotlight you. Hang on. Hang on. Sorry, my fingers are trying. Okay, go for it. Oh, it's blurring. Wait, if you put it right in front of your face, maybe it might get it.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, it's different.
Yeah, it's a different company.
It's different. Close though. Is it good? Good. All right. And it's is that in America? You in America? Yeah.
Is my microphone working?
Yep, I got you.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I got it through Fly Fish Food, which is a thing. It just on the package, it just says Nature Spirit and then the Fish Hunter Marabou. So I don't know if you saw a good picture of it or whatever, but I like it. I mean, there's really good and bad Marabou, like, and this has been some of the best I've got. And it was a little more expensive. I think it's like $5 or $6 as opposed to, like 2 or 3. So I enjoy it.
Awesome. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, because we obviously Will and I are both in Canada, so it's not today in Canada clearly, but yeah.
Yeah, I use both of those Marabous, and the Pro Choice, certainly if you're winding it on a steelhead fly, is generally better, and it's more consistent in the colors. But the Fish Hunter stuff's great for streamers and everything else like that.
Awesome. Thank you. What's the next question about feathers or hackles? Anyone have a question in particular? Frank, you're awfully quiet. Did you run into any issues in your tutorials or anything that you were stuck with as far as questions about materials?
I'll jump in. Can we talk about Spey hackle, Will?
Yes.
Sure.
So here in the States, of course, heron is a non-starter unless you happen to, find an animal on the beach. It used to be able to get a blue-eared pheasant pretty easily, but that in the last couple of years has become very scarce. So that limits you to, schlappen, a couple other things, or you just don't attempt to tie flies of any size. Have you got any suggestions, solutions at all to solve that?
Well, the original Spey material. So if you're just looking to, like tie like the original Spey flies from Knox, like any of the Ryaks or anything like that, they were all originally tied with schlappen or coke, or Speycock, however you want to call it, and it's basically just the side tails off of a rooster.
Okay.
And obviously you always want natural, so this is a natural black, and what you want is all these little fuzzy bits down here on the bottom. So those fuzzy bits always hung out the back on the traditional Spey flies, like any of the ones you see. Like I don't know if you have any of O'Keefe's books, or if you have the Farlow's book that just came out a couple years ago. So if you look at any of the traditional Spey patterns, they'll always have these little fuzzy bits, because for the most part, when we're tying on hackles, we're always tying in the tip, right? Like you're folding it back,
Right.
and you're tying it like that. Well, the traditional Spey flies were done the opposite way. So what they were doing is they were tying the stem down like that, and they were leaving some of these fuzzy bits out of the back. So this is just like run-of-the-mill schlappen that I think I got from Fly Angler Distributors at Michael and Young up here. And I mean, you can find this stuff anywhere. John McLean sells at Feathers MC. He sells you a bundle tied together about that big for like $7.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and not every feather in there is going to be good.
Right.
What you have to look for I don't know if you guys can see this, backside might be better. I don't know if you guys can see this clearly, but you see where that stem starts to thicken up, right? Right about there.
Right.
So what you want to look for is you want to look for feathers that have the fuzzy bits starting where the feather is super thin and pliable, because otherwise you're not going to be able to wrap that on the hook. And because when you do your first turn, obviously you've tied that in, and this has to be tied in right from the very back of the hook. I thought I brought a fly box with me here. Yeah, I did. So this is out of my beat up fly box that has been drowned over the years, so the flies don't look like anything. But if you take like this cauldron here, if you look at the back, you'll see all the fuzzy bits out there. They start right at the very back of the body.
Yep.
So obviously, when you tie it in, it's got to be tied all the way along the whole shank of the hook, and then it has to be bent right back on itself. So if that stem is too thick, it'll break, right? So when you go through the bag, or if you're standing in the fly shop and you see a bunch of this stuff, and you're picking it off the shelf, look for a bag with as many feathers in there that have the fuzzy bits on the skinny little part of the stem there. And then the one way you can get away from that is before you tie it on the hook, you can actually take your thumbnail and you can beat the crap out of it with your thumbnail and just press it in there 4 million times to collapse the material that the actual shank of the feather is made, or the stem of the feather is made out of. And if you just keep pressing your thumbnail in there, eventually it'll pulverize it to the point where you can flex it over. And then of course you're anchoring that down with your counter wrapped tinsel, and that'll stiffen it up. So when you tie that feather in and you bend it over, your first wrap with your counter wrap, you want that to be right where that stem starts.
Yep.
And that takes a little bit of practice to line that all up. But once you kind of get that figured out, then, that'll, alleviate that. And then, so if you're not too into tying like the actual traditional Spey flies, the one thing you can go for to kind of mimic heron is a burnt goose.
Okay.
But the problem with the burnt goose is you'll buy a package of it, only about 2 or 3 are usable, because once again, when you start at the back, as you go forward, that burnt goose is off of a bigger feather, so that stem gets thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker.
Right.
So it's kind of a bit of a crappy situation for hackles these days, because even I've noticed up in Canada, you can't get blue ears anymore.
Right.
I don't know what happened or what's going on with that, but there's just none available. So that's one thing you can do, is you can tie the absolute traditionals. You can look for burnt goose, or I don't know, if you want to chance it, you can always order the heron out of China. It's on eBay all the time.
Right. Right. Thank you. That's helpful.
Sorry, Dan. With the burnt goose, because I actually had never thought of that or heard of this. Can you peel the membrane and wrap the membrane?
You can, but most of the time on a really small feather like that, the membrane is so fragile that the second you go to bend it over, it'll break on you. And then a lot of the times with the chicken feathers, I don't quite know how to explain this, but like when you grab it, you just strip it off like that. So you've pulled it off on that membrane, but as it climbs up the feather, the membrane actually goes further and further away from the barbules, and they're just attached on the very, very outside of the membrane, and they just fall off. I've tried that before with some of the thicker schloppen like this, and I don't know, maybe other people have had better results, but it's never really worked for me.
Are you doing your own burning? Like,
Sorry?
are you doing your own burning? Your own bleach burning?
I don't burn anything.
Gotcha.
No, when I most of my hackles that I use these days are all heron. It's just so readily available up in Canada now that there's honestly not much point in using anything else for us.
Hang on, I missed this memo. When did it become available in Canada? Oh, you're
it's-
talking about not the gray heron.
Yeah, it's the Asian gray heron. They farm them for food overseas. There, it's 100% legal in Canada. You can get it from anybody. It looks almost the same as our natural blue heron, but it's a different species. You can get it anywhere.
So the COs are still just killing the blue heron and putting them in piles and burning them. They haven't monetized that yet.
No, as far as I know, I'm not sure what happens with that. You know, you see one dead every now and again. Well, you know, on the Chilliwack or on the Vetter there, April, at the Heron Sanctuary part there, you see one dead every now and again.
I heard that they kill them when they get into people's ponds and stuff, and that they just end up burning them.
Probably. I don't know why anybody hasn't thought to monetize them yet, but I've got a couple full skins in my freezer that I found on the river behind the house here.
Okay. Anyone else for questions? With books, what's your favorite book, Will?
Probably, oh, what's it called? It's Redenditch's Library of Classic Salmon Flies. It's got, I think there's close to, well over 1,000 patterns in there. I can never remember the name of it. It's over there on my shelf. I'll grab it. Probably be easier.
I can never say, I always used to call him Radenhick. I can never say his name, but he's a hard start. I wonder, I'll ask Will about an entry book, because I know some people on the call are new. Do you have an entry book too that you recommend after this? Oh, let's
Well,
see his last name. Yeah. So how do you say it? Redenditch.
Redenditch or Redensich. I don't really know how to pronounce it either. Redenditch or Redenditch, but yeah. But that's my favorite book because it's just an encyclopedia of flies. There's no step-by-step instructions or anything in there. It's just, you know, this is the fly, here's the recipe, and that's all it is.
He's tricky. Is there one that you'd recommend for beginner tires?
Any one of Shuey's books.
Oh, shoot, yeah. And actually, his latest book has a lot of the history in it too, right?
Yeah. John's first book, that Spey and D-Fly book, that give you a really good idea of where to start. And then even Bob Vaverka's book, that's a really good place to start too. Redenditch, his original classic salmon fly book, if you can find it, that's got some excellent step-by-steps in there for tying more like the frame flies and stuff like that. There's a lot of good tips and techniques there that'll really improve your tying quite quickly.
How long on average does it take most people to tie a classic fly with a substantial married wing?
That's probably different for everybody. For me, it depends how many scotches I have in me or how distracted I am. You know, there's some awfully good tires out there these days. There's a lot of guys that are a hell of a lot better than I am. But I don't know. I think everybody differs.
I've seen you do it in an hour, but I've also heard for a lot of people it takes anywhere between 8 to 12 hours. So I just want to put it out there for people listening who maybe have never even heard of a classic fly before. I don't want to derail the conversation in classic flies. Before anyone has questions about classic flies, can we talk a little bit about the difference between Spey and D flies, just for people who see your class on the website but don't really know what they are?
Yeah, so basically a Spey fly was, I guess in its purest form, it was originated on the River Spey. Most of the Spey flies that we recognize these days all came from Arthur Edward Knox's book. That's the Karen and the Cauldron and the Gold Ryak and Lady Caroline. I don't think the Lady Caroline was in that one. A lot of these flies were originated by some of the old gillies like Geordie Shanks, and I can't remember a few of the other guys' names, but you know, like Shuey often states, you know, it's not the gillies that recorded this; it was all the rich English fishermen that recorded all these patterns and everything. So there's probably plenty of patterns out there that have gone missing in time. But for a D pattern, obviously the origination of it came from somewhere around the river D, right? And I don't really know much of the history around the D flies, but when you go to look at them, they are different in proportion. You have a much longer, straighter shank. Most of the traditional D hooks you see have a dead straight shank. They're probably 1.5 times or 2 times longer. They just have a simple round bend to them, and then the wings are always tied on in a scissor form. So when you flip the fly with like the point pointing down, you look at it, the wings go like that, and is where the Spey fly is tinted mallard wings or tinted turkey, or in some cases tinted golden pheasant tail.
Right. Do you know if it was just a different style, or how do they fish differently in the water?
D flies, they tend to have a fair bit more movement, I think, because the materials on them are generally a lot longer. Like the wings are a lot longer. They often go quite far behind the bend of the hook, so they kind of flap around in the water a little bit more. The hackles go past the bend of the hook a fair bit, so they obviously move around in the water a little bit more. Spey flies, I'm assuming, have a little bit more of an undulating motion and a little bit more kind of a softer motion, I would say, because of the fuzzy bits at the back of the pattern. But yeah, as far as like fishing them, like I've never hitched a D pattern or anything like that. I always end up hitching Spey patterns. So D patterns tend to be more of a straighter fish.
So it's not that one's for different kind of water or for faster water or something.
No, I don't think so. I mean, D flies are, just by the nature of the hook, they're a lot heavier.
But you prefer, I'm assuming you prefer Spey flies, just from what I've seen and what you have tattooed on you.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we let Will go tonight and we let all of you go back tonight?
Yeah, do you fish your naturals during the winter as well, like February here at all? Or I don't know if you probably don't fish the lower mainland anymore, right?
Oh no, I get down there quite a bit.
Oh.
Most of the time I just fish a Heron fly, or I fish a lot of Sid Glasso patterns. I really like those.
Sid Glasso. Okay. And are you sinking them like 2, 3, like this?
Sometimes I'll use a type 3 sink tip. It depends which river I'm on. For the most part, I usually fish a 25-foot leader and a longer line, and just
okay. Yeah.
I've never really been that big of a fan of sink tips. I've really gotten away from that in the last, I don't know, 5-6 years. Even in the wintertime, I pretty much just fish a dry line.
Well, it's more traditional every year, I'm finding.
Yeah, in the summertime, I pretty much just fish dry flies now too. So
from your fishing to your alcohol, Will, you're a classic.
yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any other questions? And if we do have questions later, Will, I don't want to flood you, but is there a way that we can ask questions to you?
Yeah, I don't know if any of you have Instagram or whatever. You can just reach out to me on there, or if anybody has a question and they can't get a hold of me for some reason, just I don't know, assume they can fire them off to you, April.
Yeah.
You can, I don't know, give out my email or whatever.
Yeah, sounds good. I can do the back and forth. Anyone else have any other questions before we wrap it up? Will you you've got so much knowledge. I feel like we could do a whole nother one of these on history. I mean, your brain is overflowing. I'm just going through looking at everyone. Anyone else?
For us who don't have access to salmon streams, but more like trout and even bass, are there any, like a couple patterns we could start off with tying that may work for those that kind of give us an introduction more to these classic patterns? I've been tying more like older, but more like deer hair and hair type patterns, but the feather patterns are very interesting.
Spades. There's a pattern for steelhead called a spade. And what they are is they're kind of a grub pattern that's been cut in half. And I think that was an Alec Jackson origination, was a spade. I think they're in John Shuey's book. And then the other patterns you can look to tying are grubs. And if you have any information on Kelson or I think it's either mainly Kelson or Fisher or Price Tannet, look up the grub patterns, because basically what grub patterns are is they are the precursor to the intruder. It's basically 3 steps of hackles and 3 steps of bodies, and they've been around for 150, 170 years, and you can tie them quite small. And there's a lot of components in those that will teach you a little bit of the basics of tying classics.
Are any of the ones that you typed for us pretty easy, Will? I'm going through the curriculum now. Lady Caroline, Winter's Hope, Silver Heron, Dallas, Caldrain, Solduck, Gold Silk, Thunder and Lightning, GP, Croy Fancy, Steelhead Fly and Techniques. I don't remember that one being too hard. Ackroyd, Brora. Am I saying that right?
Sorry?
River 2. Oh, the Brora? Brora?
Oh, Brora.
Brora. Black Dog, Glassos, Gold Heron. Are any of those ones that you'd recommend for someone to start with?
Yeah, the Glassos Gold Heron is a fairly simplistic pattern. So are any of Glassos patterns. There's not a lot of materials to tie them, and you can get away with tying them in smaller sizes just using Coke. Because if you look at this stuff, like that's well over 1 inch long there. It can almost mimic a Spey hackle on like a size 2, and that'll work just fine for bass or trout. And the thing with Glassos is they're fairly basic to tie, but they are very, very difficult to get the proportions right. And if any of you have Instagram or anything, or are familiar with Art Lindgren, there's a fly tyer out there. His name is Sean Delquist, and nobody on the planet ties a better Sid Glasso pattern than that guy. If you want to see what a Glasso pattern should look like, look at that guy's stuff. I don't know how he does it. They're so simple to tie, but once you see him, you'll be like, that's what it's supposed to look like.
Got it. Thank you. So yeah, Drew, between the grub and chapter 19 and Will's section there, you should find something. And then, yeah, I'd love to see what everyone ties. It was really fun for a while there. Everyone was posting your flies on the Facebook group, and it was rewarding to watch people come so far with their tying. So that's all on you, Will. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions before we wrap it up? It's been a great night. Got a lot of people saying thank you in the chat. I think we're all ready for another glass of, what are you on? You're on scotch. You don't do whiskey these days, do you?
There's a couple bourbons behind me, but mainly just.
Well, enjoy your beverage. It was great to see all of you, and we will see you next week. I will have this recording up by the end of the day. Okay, thanks, Will. Great to see you as always. Talk to you all soon, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.